Hi, I'm Anthony, your internet older brother,
And I'm Gabby, the silent middle child.
and welcome to the 7th episode of our weekly podcast where we talk about topics chosen by our Patreon viewers. And this is going to be our first video that is also going to be posted a week later on YouTube for our wider subscribers. So we hope that everybody watching on YouTube enjoys this as well.
Yeah, and a big thank you to everybody who just recently joined our YouTube channel from TikTok. We noticed a big surge of followers on YouTube after our recent posts about not being able to post as much on TikTok anymore. So we really appreciate you for moving with us to this platform.
Absolutely. And if you are watching on a social media platform like YouTube, do please like, subscribe, or follow us so that you can continue to see our content. And if you're interested in seeing these videos in a faster time frame, the day that they're posted, you can also join us on Patreon, where we have all of our free content posted as well, and then the paid content, early access to videos like this.
And just a quick disclaimer, we are not professionals. We're just two millennials, older brother, little sister, talking about these things with our own opinions. My brother is super smart and well-researched, which is why you all followed him.
Thank you, thank you. And with that, let's get into our topic for the week.
So this week we're going to be talking about Trump and his health, which is super relevant to what we're seeing going on in social media today. And we're also going to be covering JD Vance, doing a deep dive on his background.
Absolutely. We'll start with Trump's health specifically, and then we'll talk about JD Vance's background and the consequences if he ends up as president.
So let's dive right into it. Trump's health has been a huge topic in social media as of late. A lot of people have speculated that he is not doing well. Many have speculated this last weekend that he died even. What do you think about all of this, all these rumors?
Well, a little premature, but certainly not without some merit. Even without specific health concerns and knowledge of Trump's, general lifestyle, he's very old. He's almost as old as Biden, and we've seen lots of signs, even before the recent speculations of his physical and mental decline, right? Um, I saw someone on social media say that, if my grandparents acted like Trump did, I wouldn't leave them in charge of a prayer circle, much
True.
less in charge of the most powerful country on the planet. So,
Yes.
he hasn't been in a great place to start with, right? Um, and with and recently we've been seeing all sorts of other signs of declining health, right? We see the swollen ankles, we see bruising on his hands. He disappeared for a couple days with,
He also got lost on the roof, if you recall.
yeah,
And he was like yelling down to the reporters.
yeah. So we're seeing general signs of dementia, which we've seen for a while. But I think most of the rumors recently stem from more signs of potentially more serious health issues. I know there was rumors still circulating, that he had some serious heart problems,
Congestive heart failure, I believe.
congestive heart failure. Swollen ankles can be associated with that. It can be associated with diabetes.
Yeah.
A number of other things. So these are really serious medical conditions, especially at his age. As far as what we officially know, the White House and White House doctors say that he has chronic venous insufficiency, which is basically a problem with blood circulation, I believe. Not a serious medical condition in itself, although I've seen a lot of people, a lot of nurses on social media saying that it's rarely something that happens just on its own. I'm not a medical professional, so I don't want to speculate on that.
Right.
But the public explanation, the official explanation, is that he has this minor blood flow issue and that bruising is caused by aspirin, which is used to treat it. And that could very well be true. I suspect that he has more serious health problems myself, but either way, we're seeing that he's in a physical decline, right? He's having trouble walking up the stairs of Air Force One. He's been photographed with what appears to be leg braces on.
Leg braces?
Yeah, under his pants.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, there's been a couple photographs with odd bulges in his pants that would be consistent with leg braces.
Wow.
Um,
Don't you think it's interesting that, he has previously reported, and the White House has reported, that his mental health is excellent, his physical health is excellent, he's winning all these golf tournaments. And then as of late, they're suddenly saying, okay, there is some health issues. Why do you think the changes?
Well, we'll get into this as we get a little further into the episode, but part of that goes into the whole conspiracy theory that JD Vance basically exists to take over Trump's place when he dies, right?
Right.
Which is the job of the vice president, to be fair.
Yeah.
But the idea is that JD Vance was placed there with the assumption that Trump is going to die in office, right?
Yeah.
Either through normal means because of his health, or through perhaps hastened methods, we'll call
Yes.
it. And that he's this very specific placement to function for.
Yeah, and that leads to the question of who's really in charge here.
Right, which of course goes back to
Techno-feudalism.
techno-feudalism and Peter Thiel, which we've talked
Our
about.
favorite topic.
We've talked about in some of our previous episodes. We'll get into that in a bit. But, Trump's health is certainly not doing good. Do I think he's at the brink of death? I don't know. And I don't think anybody that's not close to him can really know. I think that it's certainly a possibility. Anybody at that age can be at the brink of death, but we also have people that live to 100, 120.
Yeah.
And, he's at a time in his life where his health is certainly not great, but I don't think that necessarily means that he's going to pass away.
Right. I don't either. I wish he would, but I don't think that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of talk about this on the left. It's taken up a lot of space in social media. And, a couple people have said, hey, is this a distraction? Is there a reason why he's letting this rumor go on? He could have, if he's healthy, he could have come out and come on camera, talk to the press and said something to rebuke this, but he hasn't. Is it a distraction from the Epstein files and the protests?
That's a good question. I think it certainly could be. I've speculated before that, or I've said before in one of our shorts that if we're talking about collapsing the MAGA cult, right? Trump simply passing away of natural causes is not as effective as him being discredited as their leader because he hasn't accomplished the mission of the cult, which, again, MAGA is started as this kind of populist drain the swamp, get rid of all these elites base, right? The whole idea is draining the corruption from the government. And the longer that Trump fails to do that, the more the whole cult fractures. And it is better for him to be dethroned as the leader than to simply die and leave the possibility for somebody else to take his place.
Right.
So when you get into things like that, it's like, could it be a distraction from the Epstein files? Possibly. I think it's more likely that he is just having some health problems and can't conceal it because he is so public of a figure.
Yeah.
Even more so than other presidents, which is already a very public position. He loves to be in front of the media.
Yeah.
And when he's not there, it's conspicuous, as we've seen in the last couple of days.
Even just posting on Truth Social.
Yeah.
I mean, he's usually constantly on there posting, and he's not.
And we've seen other things, not just from the left, but from the right as well. Alex Jones has commented that Trump could collapse within a year, right? We see JD Vance start talking about taking over some jobs of the presidency, or how he's prepared to assume the role. And we've even seen Trump, say with some reluctance that JD Vance is prepared to take the role. So it certainly seems like JD Vance is being set up to take Trump's place and to try and instill that idea in the populace's mind. But until that happens, I don't think we can really say how it's gonna go one way or the other.
Absolutely. So let's get into JD Vance. What's some of his background that you can give?
So JD Vance is a bit interesting because I feel like for a lot of people, he kind of came out of nowhere. Right? Maybe if you were in Ohio, you know who he is, but he didn't really take the stage until 2022.
Yeah, no, I'd never heard his name prior to him being vice president.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how he grew up, because I think that does play a big role in kind of who he is and why he's such a big fan of Thiel. Right? So JD Vance was born in the Appalachian Mountains in Midtown, Ohio. He was raised in basically a poor upbringing. His mother was a drug addict. He talks a lot in his memoir, which we'll talk about. He talks a lot about kind of, abuse as a child and how he was raised by his grandparents, right? So he grows up like this. Shortly after he graduates high school, like a lot of poor people do, he joins the military. He spends 4 years in the military as a military journalist, during which the time he is deployed to Iraq, right? Fairly standard upbringing so far. He does talk in his book, Hillbilly Elegy, about that time and kind of how it shaped his views and especially referencing his modern like Christian conservative views. He talks a lot about his mother's beliefs and the beliefs of those around him in Catholicism and all these type of things.
So that book was written prior to his political career.
Yes, yeah. The book was written in 2016, at the same time that he was working for Peter Thiel, which we'll get to, but that's a little bit later.
Yeah.
So he grows up. He grows up poor in the Appalachians. Joins the military, spends 4 years there, comes back and goes to Ohio State University. He graduates from there and then moves on to Yale, which is kind of
For law school?
For law school, that's correct. Which is where his kind of political ambitions start, and where he meets Peter Thiel for the first time.
So he came up from nothing.
Came up from nothing, more or less. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. He does have
because he's used that in his campaign.
Yeah.
He's referenced a lot how he worked his way up from being having a poor childhood. So
yeah, that is
used that in campaigning.
That is certainly true. He did start off. He came up basically from nothing, and I think that shapes a lot of his views, because you do get among the Christian conservative base, especially the poor base, this idea of like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yes.
And he talks a lot about how like in his memoirs how he'd be like living off of food he'd be like working an honest job and barely affording food, while his drug addict neighbors on food stamps were eating steaks. You get a lot of this like
chip on your shoulder,
chip on your
anecdotal issues. Yeah, that
Exactly.
they're applying to an entire nation.
Yeah, and that's one of the main criticisms of the book, is that like it relies a lot on these kind of like bigoted racist views of everybody on welfare is just freeloading, or women are doing this, or the immigrants are doing this, and that is common in these communities, right?
Yeah.
So he gets a lot of that from that, and interestingly, he talks about going through a phase of kind of like general spirituality, Christianity in his youth, and then as he goes to college and in the military, really kind of transitioning to atheism, and then after meeting Peter Thiel, who is a self-professed Catholic, switching back to Catholicism.
That seems disingenuous.
Well, his claim is that the idea that someone like Peter Thiel, who he views as very successful, and kind of like at the top of the authority hierarchy, which is so ingrained into conservative thought, the idea that somebody like him could be a Catholic would like made him question his beliefs as an atheist, and like reevaluate like what Christianity means. And he talks about it because he grew up Protestant, where there's like tends to be a lot of strong hate for Catholicism.
Yeah.
And so he switches not just from Christianity to atheism to Christianity, he switches from Protestant to atheism to Catholicism.
Yeah, that's very uncommon.
I think that relatively rapid changing over the course of basically 4 to 6 years, right, from when he leaves high school to when he meets Thiel in Yale. I think that can be contributed to some of the extremism in his beliefs, because I think he went through a lot of ideological change and like having to justify certain types of thought patterns. This is speculation on my part, of course, but
yeah, but it makes sense when you have someone who's coming from a childhood of poverty,
Yeah.
and then being pulled into a world of Peter Thiel, who is a billionaire, and able to give him the world and promise him the world. You would, kind of treat that as like, everything he says goes. Everything he says is right.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people talk about how really one of the core ideologies of conservatism is respect for hierarchy and authority, right? That the people at the top deserve respect and power, and the people at the bottom must have done something wrong. And so,
And the fact that he made it,
yeah,
right, makes him look at everyone else who didn't make it and go, well, you just didn't work as hard as I did.
exactly. And JD Vance is quite intelligent, I think. If you read some of the articles he's written, which we'll talk about in a moment, he's very well spoken. He grasps a lot of like deep nuance in things like debate and conversation, and he's not Trump,
Yeah.
right? And I think that
This is why people are afraid
when
of
you
him,
get
I
this
think.
poor upbringing, and then he sees somebody like Vance who's in charge, and he's really focusing on and he sees somebody like Thiel in charge, right?
Yeah.
And he's really focusing on Thiel as somebody who is really intelligent, speaking to Yale students, talking about the mechanisms of oppression and how capitalism in its current form has failed elites and poor people, and professing to have this techno-feudalism solution to fix everything, because Thiel really does view himself as like a savior, right? He's going to take power to fix everything himself. I think part of what shaped Vance is like hooking onto that and that idea of Thiel, and when you combine it with like the conservative beliefs and all of that, you get who he is today, which is a man who's really at odds with a lot of his previous statements. I think that he is quite smart, but also insecure. And because he's insecure about his own beliefs and intelligence, he's easy to manipulate, which is why you see this back and forth going on.
That tracks.
Getting a little off
That tracks.
topic, yeah.
No, I understand,
Yeah.
why Vance would be interested in Thiel and why he would cling on to his ideology. Why was Thiel interested in Vance? How did they meet?
Right. So they met at Yale in 2011 when Thiel was giving a speech to the Yale law students. And in his speech, he's really talking about kind of the underlying beliefs of the kind of techno-feudalism ideas that Thiel promotes, which is that the elite professionals, Thiel, people at Harvard, Yale, those type of people, are being trapped by capitalism into these hyper-competitive jobs. And because of the nature of current capitalism and technological stagnation as capitalism, right, it's all about things like, he says, all of our technological power is focused on producing things like iPhones rather than producing like biomedical cures, right?
Okay.
And all of this is driven by a need for profit rather than advancing humanity.
I mean, on the surface level, that sounds good.
And on the surface level, some of it is true, right? A lot of the powerful people like Thiel have valid points mixed in with the bullshit.
Right, as usual.
But what he talks about, he's focusing on the wealthy, right? The elites. He says because of the narrowing nature of capitalism, right? It drives towards monopolies and highest profit at shortest term cost and all these things. The elites, the people who should be in charge, are driven to hyper competitive jobs like lawyers instead of being able to branch out and
innovate
and do their fullest potential. And that is inexplicably tied to technological stagnation as a result of profit.
Yeah, and that may be true, but what is his answer to that?
So well, his answer is techno-feudalism, right? The idea that like capitalism should kind of go away, and that these technological elites, the geniuses, the people in charge, who he claims are these kind of benevolent overlords, are going to be freed of their shackles of capitalism and bring humanity into a better future. We see the same ideal in Musk, right? Musk is the classic narcissistic billionaire. He's done a lot of horrible things, but what does he focus his projects on? He focuses it on Tesla, electric cars, going to Mars to have this backup planet in case
but things that
Earth
have
is
advanced
destroyed, right?
society.
And he has, to be fair, done some crazy things. Like Starship just had its first successful test a few days ago, and Starship is a game changer for space exploration. But the point is, the idea is that these, benevolent overlord billionaires like Musk and Thiel, if unrestrained by capitalism and this technological stagnation, can really bring humanity forward much and help everybody, not just the elites, if they're just allowed to do their thing and everybody else is kind of just peasants that are benefiting from their benevolence. Which, of course, ignores the idea that that hasn't worked out well in history ever. Right? The oligarchs in Russia are not benevolently benefiting their population. They're oppressing them and taking as much money as they can from them. So
that's still an oligarchy at its core, and it's also prioritizing the technology over humanity.
So you get this savior complex, right, in Thiel. But Vance likes this idea because he sees the same things in the poor community he grew up in. He sees a community oppressed by the capitalism, right, and the poor being drained of all these things, right. Again, right, MAGA at its core is a populist movement. It is about overthrowing the rich that are draining power from draining the swamp.
That's so ironic,
right?
though.
So what I think Vance sees, nobody knows about Vance, but what I think Vance sees in Thiel is a savior, because Thiel is not in his mind part of the establishment. Thiel is somebody who wants to overthrow the corruption, the stagnation that is trickling down to the poor people like himself, and institute this new order where we're all in this technological utopia, right? And I think that Vance is, again, speculation. I think that Vance is intelligent enough to understand what Thiel wants, but not a good enough critical thinker to see the problems with it. And especially when he's young and in college and easily influenced, he latches onto this, right? So he hits it off with Thiel. He gets a chance to meet with him, talk with him, while he's at Yale, and they kind of connect there. This is kind of the start of their relationship, right?
And Thiel took him under his wing?
Basically, yeah. So in 2013, 2014, Vance graduates from Yale. And he says in one of the articles that he's written, which I'll include in the references for this video, he says that he knew, because of Thiel's speech, that he needed to shift away from law, because he didn't want to be caught up in one of these hyper-competitive professions where the elites are stuck competing against each other rather than
so he changed his entire career path.
Right. So he graduates from Yale. He does spend a few years in a combination of law and working for Republican senators and in various political places. But he's trying to shift his career away from a career in law, right? And then in 2016, a few years after he graduates, he is hired by Peter Thiel at a venture capitalist firm. It is at this time, while he's working for Thiel, doing general venture capitalist nonsense, that he writes, or at least publishes, Hillbilly Elegy, which is his memoir that did very well. It's one of the main things that kind of brought him into the public eye and eventually became a Netflix film.
Yeah. And then later bit him in the ass.
And then later bit him in the ass, for sure. But you know, at the time, it was very well received.
Yes.
It has, you know, I haven't read it myself. I have no intention to. But by most of the accounts I can find, you know, it is at its surface like a very kind of poetic take about Appalachian life and growing up poor. I've seen a lot of criticisms that it's really just a lot of kind of like racist and classist stereotypes, thinly disguised as like a tragic backstory, but it does well.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people relate to those sentiments.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, those sentiments are what created MAGA.
Yes.
Right? And what creates, if you take out the racism and some other things, what creates the leftist movement, right? They are sentiments of, we are being oppressed by the elites. It's two sides of the same coin. One side just has a lot of racism and lack of education mixed in.
Yes.
The other side maybe has a little too much idealism mixed in,
Yes.
right? So he's hired by Peter Thiel. He spends a few years working for him. And then after he leaves Thiel's firm, presumably after they've made plans, he spends several years, basically up until 2021. So 2016 to 2021, it's 5 years. He spends 5 years basically building political connections. He creates or joins several nonprofits that do nothing, right? They just raise money for the nonprofit members and disguise it as charity.
Oh, wow.
He creates or joins several venture capital companies, right? Basically building monetary connections. He uses the success of Hillbilly Elegy to do work in media, writing articles for news sites, including, you know, prominent liberal sites like CNN and the New Yorker. I believe the New Yorker, could be the New York Times. And, you know, he works with a lot of conservative advocacy groups doing advocacy on, like, you know, Christianity and general conservative policies.
Christianity, but I thought he was a Catholic now.
General Christian, you know, conservative Christian
Conservative
nationalism.
nationalist views.
He's advocating for all these things. He's building connections in these communities. He's gathering funds.
Gotcha.
Right? For the most part, except for as the author of Hillbilly Elegy, the world still doesn't know who he is. Right. During this time, up until really 2021, he is a Trump critic.
Yes,
Right.
there's many clips.
Right. We've got lots of different quotes from him saying that, you know, he calls Trump cultural heroin.
What does that mean exactly?
He says, quote, you know, he makes some people, the people like JD Vance, right, the poor white community, because he's talking about the poor white community. He's like, he makes some feel better for a bit, but he cannot fix what ails them, and one day they'll realize it. Still haven't realized it.
Right.
Right. He says, Trump makes people I care about afraid, ironically. Immigrants, Muslims, because of this, I find him reprehensible. God wants better of us. And, you know, most notably, he says, I'm a never Trump guy.
Yeah, I'm a never Trump guy.
Right? We remember the clips from the election. So he
Yes.
really dislikes Trump, and he's very vocal about it. Some of these quotes come from the articles he published at that time. Right?
And also, I agree with all those things.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, right? Vance is not stupid. He is intelligent. He's capable of seeing the patterns of manipulation. And ultimately, I don't think, even as vice president and now, that he supports Trump. I think he recognizes that Trump is going to die in office, whether intentionally or of natural causes, and he's just waiting.
Yeah, he's an opportunist.
He's an opportunist.
I've never gotten
Yeah.
the vibe that he is actually a Trump supporter.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think MAGA knows that too, which is why they don't like him.
Yeah, exactly. And he didn't poll well during the, during the elections, and he
No.
doesn't poll well now with MAGA.
Even during the campaign, he was immediately disliked.
Yeah. He was disliked by, we'll get to that in a second, but yeah, he was not well liked. Anyhow, so you know, he spends several years doing politics, building things, talking shit about Trump, and then in 2021, a year before Vance runs for the Ohio senator position, despite having not really any political experience previously, Thiel arranges a private meeting between Vance and Trump.
Interesting.
Yeah, I believe it was at Mar-a-Lago. Don't quote me on that, but they talk. They come to an agreement. You know, they put aside their differences supposedly. And then in 2022, Vance runs for the position of a Ohio senator with $10 million from Thiel and public support from Trump.
So this has been a plan for a long time.
It's been a plan for a long time, right? He goes from basically nobody, just the author of this book, columnist to an Ohio senator.
Right.
Right.
With no political background.
Yeah, not really. He's been building political connections, and he did spend some time working for a Republican senator. So he's not he has it's not that he has no political background,
very limited.
but he has not done any type of like local politics.
Yeah.
He hasn't been a representative. He goes straight for the senator position and gets it. He wins the election.
Seemingly through the connection of Peter Thiel.
Basically, right. He's got money. He's got Trump.
Yes.
That's all you really needed at that time. And then in 2 years later, he hasn't even completed his first term as senator. He is, of course, nominated by the Republican National Convention as a vice president.
Huge jump.
Yeah, much to the confusion of the general populace,
Yes.
right? Everybody's like,
Who is this guy?
who is this guy? The left and right are like, who is this guy? All of this stuff about his previous, shit talking about Trump comes out. Pretty much the only people that support him are the billionaires. Thiel supports him, Musk supports him, and David Sachs, who is a big Republican donor.
He's their chess piece.
Supports them, right? Which tells you really all you need
Yes.
to know. So the 2024 elections happened. Vance is super awkward. They basically hide him from the public eye as much as possible. But nonetheless, Donald Trump wins the presidency.
Unfortunately. So let's get into what Vance has done since he's been in office as vice president, which is seemingly more than most vice presidents.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird juxtaposition because on one hand, I feel like we the public haven't really heard much about Vance.
No.
Which, to be fair, is common for vice presidents. The role itself is not well defined, and you have some that basically do nothing and some that are quite active, right? Vance has actually been quite active, quietly,
Yes.
which I think is the intention, right? First of all, he is basically the spearhead for all of the Project 2025 policies, right? He is the one that's really pushing these things. Trump is, from as much as we can tell, Trump is basically just signing papers that are given to him.
So you're saying he's drafting these executive orders?
If he's not drafting them, he's the one that's pushing these policies in Congress and elsewhere, right? He does have a lot of ties within Congress from his time working as a congressional aide and as a senator. So he is the one pushing these policies. He's been responsible for rallying votes for several of the bills that have passed under the Trump administration. He took the role of the RNC finance chair, handling donor relationships, which it's unusual for the vice president to do that. It's not, it kind of makes sense that he's doing it because he has connections to all the billionaires. So at least from the Republican standpoint, it makes sense that he's kind of in charge of the donor money. And then he's also participated in a number of foreign policy visits or meetings, which, again, is not that unusual for the vice president. Kamala did a lot of this as well when she was vice president. But it's unusual to me, at least, that he is doing these things almost in replacement of Trump rather than because Trump is busy doing something else, right? Like Biden was very active from a foreign policy stance, and Kamala would be doing things when Biden was busy doing other things.
Right.
Trump is kind of just golfing and posting on social media, while Vance is kind of running the show from behind the scenes. He's had meetings with Xi, Netanyahu, Modi, a bunch of other foreign policy leaders. Zelensky, he famously insulted.
He's met with them alone?
Either alone or together with Trump, but a lot of times alone, right? He also spoke fairly recently at the Munich Security Conference, arguing about like internal threats versus foreign adversaries. So he's handling a lot of foreign policy and he's shaping a lot of domestic policy quietly, right?
Which would indicate that he is getting ready to take over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any surprise that we're seeing this. This was kind of speculated to be and showing to be his role, right? His role is to implement Peter Thiel's Project 2025, right?
Yes.
Project 2025 is from Peter Thiel. His role is to implement Project 2025 and presumably to take over when Trump dies.
And he's doing that successfully.
Right? If anything, Trump has been perhaps a blessing and a curse. A blessing because he rallies his base against things that they really shouldn't be rallying against, right? Not just logically, but like it doesn't make sense for them to be rallying
against their own interests.
Right. But he's also a curse because Trump does things for stupid and emotional
Yeah, that are
reasons.
outside of Project
Right.
2025.
He puts tariffs on countries because he doesn't like something they said, right?
Right.
Which is not to say that like things like tariffs aren't part of the Project 2025 policy, but there's a difference between like careful structuring and oh you insulted my best bro, Bolsonaro, we're going to put a 40% tariff on your imports. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, he's been quite active.
What kind of policies has he been pushing for?
A lot of the same things that we saw on the campaign and that we expect from Project 2025. Plus a couple of weirder ones, although again, in the lens of like Christian nationalism, not so strange, right? We of course see the isolationist policies that are indicative of fascist governments in Project 2025. The idea that the U.S. should kind of like turtle up internationally and just exist as this power at the top of the mountain, but not really interacting as much, or if anything, other nation states are subservient to us and almost like pay us our dues. You know what I mean? So we see like the tariffs, we see the disconnection of allies, we see the common and true, to be fair, line that our allies in NATO aren't contributing enough to the military complex in their countries, but we see things that are designed to drive wedges rather than like constructive criticism. You know what I mean? Um, we see, of course, domestically, we see like the whole techno-feudalism thing, which we've talked about, the removal of restraints from the billionaires and these supposed tech overlords. We see the draining of money from the poor and the 99% to fund those tax cuts. We see the racism, which is kind of again a requirement of fascism. You have to have an enemy in order to turn your base against that enemy. So we see all the things we expect. We also see some general weirdness. We see that he's quite clearly a member of the quiverful Christian movement. Do you know what quiverful is?
I don't.
So there's a common belief in a lot of Christian sub-denominations, especially the ones that tend to be on the crazy side, that Christians should have a lot of babies.
Yeah.
One, to like raise up as warriors of God, and also to have a lot of Christians in the future that are manipulating national policy. Right? And he's clearly one of these people. Aside from his very strongly held Christian beliefs, which he's been quite vocal about, he's said things about like how, parents should have more voting power than
Yes.
non-parents, and like childless women are weird, and like you're a sociopath if you don't want children and things like that. So we see this come out of him, right? We see that he again generally advocates for these like Republican pull yourself up by the bootstraps
Yeah.
things. We see that he seems to be connected to the Christian Zionism movement. He's very strongly advocating for Israel. Maybe not to the full craziness extent that Trump is. Trump has recently said, I believe that we should build resorts in Palestine.
I think he's recently moved forward with
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
But Vance is probably the more driving force, even if he's not as publicly vocal about it, right? Vocally, he's more moderate, but he's pushing for these things, right?
I feel like there's three different things going on here. There's the techno-feudalism. There's the move towards oligarchy, where we're taking from the 99%, giving to the billionaires. And then there's the Christian nationalism with the bigoted beliefs of racism and sexism.
Yeah.
How are those things all connected?
Well, they're all intertwined in each other, right? The oligarchy and the techno-feudalism are the same thing, right? The feudalism, what is feudalism but lords ruling over peasants, and what is oligarchy but the rich ruling over the poor, right? There's two sides of the same coin. As far as the Christian nationalism, it's had deep roots in the Republican Party. It has deep roots in the patriarchy. Ever since Reagan, really, and even going back to Nixon, we see this real shift in the Republican Party of going with the Christian base.
And do you think that those beliefs are authentic to JD Vance, or do you think that he's using them as a tool to control MAGA?
I think that they're authentic to JD Vance.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah.
I was hoping you'd say the other.
I think he believes what he's saying.
Oh, that's terrifying.
I think that Some of the things that he is saying right now are tools, like especially when like I said, when he's supporting Trump. I think that is a tool, right? His plan is for Peter Thiel to basically be in charge, and they're just outweighting Trump right now, and he's willing to play along with Trump until Trump dies. But I think that these Project 2025 beliefs are his true beliefs. I think he's latched on to Peter Thiel as like a wise mentor savior, right? He's put Peter Thiel in places. This guy is smarter than me. He knows what he's talking about, and he believes these
And
things,
he's executing all of these policies.
and he's executing all of these policies. So, you know, there's a lot of things that he's doing, but overall, right, the public doesn't know most of this.
No.
Unless you're specifically paying attention to JD Vance, you haven't heard about him since the election.
No.
Except maybe that one time that he came out and he told Zelensky that he should thank the U.S. for helping Ukraine, which was a very calculated thing to do, this idea of this like, oh, strongman authoritarian, and talking to Zelensky, which again appeals to the Republican base and this one for desire for like authority, right?
No, I feel like the only news of him has been that he's so disliked still.
Yeah.
He's booed everywhere he goes. He tries to go to different countries, different states, and he's not accepted anywhere by any group of people, really.
Yeah. So you get this weird juxtaposition where he is both quietly in power but also not seen, which kind of brings us to the current question everybody's asking, which is that if Vance is in charge, if Trump dies and Vance is in charge, is that better or worse for the rest of us?
Right. One of the most common comments that I see on our videos, especially regarding the Epstein files or the one we did about Trump's health, is JD Vance is worse. JD Vance is going to be worse. I'm more afraid of JD Vance. What do you think about all that?
I think it's a serious concern and something that we need to be worried about, but not necessarily for the reasons that a lot of people are thinking. So let's say Trump passes away, right? Whether it's soon or a year from now. JD Vance obviously becomes president. And what it really comes down to is two things. Can he control Trump's base? And the other side of that coin is if Trump passes away, will enough of the center or left see that as a good enough outcome to ignore what JD Vance does? Because JD Vance is quieter than
That's
Trump,
really interesting.
right? And that's a double-edged sword. Because on one hand, right, he is undeniably more intelligent, more efficient, and more connected. And I think among politicians and the billionaires, the people that are the keys to power, he's probably more quietly liked than Trump is. Trump is what the Russians would call a useful idiot,
Yes.
right? Unfortunately for the Republican base, he's not as easy to control as they thought he was. He kind of took their cult from them.
Yes.
MAGA started out as a Tea Party, right? But nonetheless, he is a useful idiot. But he's the useful idiot that controls MAGA. And without MAGA, the Republicans don't have a plurality or a majority in the country anymore.
But what you're saying is right now, the left and the center are very riled up about what's going on.
Yeah.
And that if Trump dies of natural causes and then JD Vance takes over, most of them will see that as a victory, and they won't be as riled up, won't be pushing back as hard against the agenda that's happening.
Yeah, for sure, right? So on one hand, you have Trump controlling MAGA. On the other hand, you have Trump riling up the left and the center. He is the focus of the hate for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
If Trump dies and JD Vance takes over, I think pretty strongly that JD Vance cannot control most of MAGA, and that as Project 2025 continues to do the things that it's doing, which is oppress the poor and help the elite, MAGA is going to, without Trump as the blindfold for that, see that and break away from the Republicans.
Yeah, they're going to turn on him.
They're going to turn on him and the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Or at least a portion of them will. The question is that break offset by enough people in the center and the left, deprived of Trump as the focus of their hate, also going to tune out again
Right.
to balance out what is lost. And does this happen far enough along in the current election cycle that it still matters? If this break happens, does it still matter what the general population thinks?
Do you mean because we wouldn't have fair elections?
Yeah, or a way to enforce that easily, right?
So you think that that's not just Trump's agenda, that is the Republican agenda?
Yeah, and that's why you're seeing things happen so quickly, right? The progression of fascism in Project 2025 is this weird juxtaposition of like slow but fast, right? It has to be slow enough that there's not this one big event that causes everybody to rebel at the same time, right? But it has to be fast enough that they can take over control before enough of the population gets riled enough to do something about it, regardless of the slowness, right?
So the pace is important.
The pace is important. And so when Vance takes over is important. How the general population reacts is important. How MAGA reacts is important.
What do you think is going to happen if you had to give your best guess?
It's really hard to say because it depends on all of those different factors. If Trump passed away today, I don't think that they have enough control yet to for Vance to reliably take charge. And especially if they can't also make Trump into a martyr somehow, right? It
And
depends on
especially
it
if there's
depends
still
on it
pressure about the
depends on
Epstein
factors
files.
like the Epstein files,
Yeah.
right? If Trump passes away and it comes out either intentionally or not afterwards that, oh, he was a big Jeffrey Epstein thing, how is MAGA going to react to that? Are they going to rally around Vance? There's certainly been attempts from the Trump administration to focus their attention on Vance. Trump has made comments that Vance is like his MAGA successor, but just because he says that doesn't necessarily mean it's true, right?
But he's also made negative comments about
yeah,
Vance.
exactly. Vance has no charisma,
None.
none, and he doesn't have the personality to lead this cult.
No.
So
But he doesn't need it if he's already the
yeah,
president.
if Trump passed away in a vacuum tomorrow and nothing else happened, I don't think Vance could take control. If Trump passed away and it came out that he was a pedophile, I think that the base splinters. The if Trump passes away a year from now and there hasn't been any other serious opposition, and Peter Thiel and those in the keys to power and those in charge have had enough time to finish their takeover,
Yeah.
it's
not
hard
good.
to say.
Not good.
Yeah,
Best case scenario is the Epstein files.
I don't
right?
think JD Vance is a threat in and of himself, but combined with other factors, he certainly is, and I don't think he
Yeah.
should be underestimated. He is awkward, and he's an unknown, and he has a lot of personality flaws, but he's not stupid. He was chosen for a reason, and that reason is to help Peter Thiel take over the country.
So on the flip side, what's the best case scenario for us to get out of the point that we're at right now?
The best case scenario, I think, is still that Trump doesn't die,
Yeah.
or at least he doesn't die before leaving office. I think the best case scenario is still that the Epstein files come out one way or the other and implicate Trump, or something else similar to that happens that the base can't ignore. Right? Trump being deposed by his own cult, which can happen, is the best outcome because it breaks MAGA as a base and it breaks the Republican Party as well. The next best case scenario is that Trump passes away soon before Vance has had time to fully consolidate power, and there is at least a fight. I don't know how that fight will turn out, but I think that there will be a fight for control over the MAGA base. After that, it's not looking good,
Right.
but we'll see what happens.
Absolutely.
And regardless of what we'll see what happens, and regardless of what happens, I think it's important that we all don't wait for wait for something to happen. We need to still be out there every day protesting, calling for a general strike.
Yeah, I think this weekend we all laid down a little bit, you
Yeah.
know? We all kind of had this hope that, like, oh, maybe Trump's dying
Yeah.
this weekend. And I think we let that make us passive, and we need to not be content with the situation. We need to not be passive.
That's right. We need to continue to be active, pushing for a general strike, pushing for these Epstein files to come out. And even if Trump does pass away, not letting that be the end of our.
Yeah, there will still be so much work to be
Yeah.
done to repair this
Yeah,
country.
that's not the end of this, right?
Absolutely.
That's the beginning of a chance. But it's not the end of the work that needs to be done to get the Republicans and Peter Thiel out of power.
Absolutely. All right, guys, I think we're going to go ahead and end it there for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Absolutely. And if you want to be one of the people that has a say in what we talk about and gets to vote on the topic of our next Patreon videos, as well as, again, have early access to them, please do consider joining our Patreon. It is $3 a month for the basic tier, less than a cup of coffee that you have each morning. And it really does help support us a lot in making these videos
And thank you so much to all of our current
and
supporters.
everything else. Yes, thank you to our current supporters as well. And we'll see you all next week.
But that's also going to be a problem because
Yeah.
they're legitimizing the inaccurate arguments that are scientifically wrong.
Yeah.
That vaccines cause autism, that vaccines are not safe for your children, that vaccines aren't necessary for healthy people,
Yeah.
that these deadly diseases like smallpox,
Yeah.
like measles, are not that bad.
And all of these things are wrong. And the thing that I don't want to say it surprises me, because nothing surprises me with these people anymore. But the thing is, like, Trump's generation, RFK's generation, should be the generation that remembers before vaccines were really mainstream, which happened in kind of this late 60s and 70s, right? They remember polio.
Well, I
Right.
think actually RFK has used that
Yeah.
as a way to actually say, "Oh, I do remember,
Yeah.
and it wasn't that bad." So he's used that as a weapon,
Yeah,
actually.
so and he's a nut job, but even today, I think a lot of people know somebody who has been affected by polio.
Yes.
Especially of that generation, they either were affected themselves. We have an uncle.
Yes.
That was affected by polio, and to have forgotten so quickly all of the things that came of that, they were not just talking about children dying. We're talking about like lifelong disfigurement.
Yes.
People forget iron lungs.
Yes.
Um,
Everyone should go watch the video of the last man in the iron lung.
yeah.
It's shocking.
And to throw away something that's so easy and so provable is just one sign of the insanity.